Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Municipality of Monroeville Citizens Night and Council Work Session. Today is Thursday, February 7th, 2013, approximately 7 p.m. If we all kindly rise for the Lord's Prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I open up to Citizens Night, I'm going to ask everybody who does want to address council to please keep your comments professional, keep your comments reasonable. Please respect the offices everybody up here sits in, and I assure you, you will get the same in return. If you attack any of the council members or any of the members attack you, I will gavel that down. I expect us all to be sane, reasonable human beings. I know this is a lot of emotional issues out there. You certainly have a right to express your thoughts and your opinions to this council. Mr. Dice has a couple of words he would like to say, and then I promise you I will open it up the floor to those who signed in first, and then any that would like to address council afterwards, you certainly may do that. Mr. Dice.
Thank you, Mayor. I received an email from the manager asking me to address some of the comments from the legal department, some of the issues that have gone on in the past couple of weeks, couple of days, both from a home rule charter standpoint and ordinance standpoint, and I'm going to do that now. I received this email yesterday. First, the manager's position. I just want to start out by saying that the manager has recently resigned, and council has accepted that resignation, Mr. Silka. Under the agreement with the manager, he is not to discuss any facts surrounding the resignation, and in turn, council should not discuss the facts surrounding that resignation. I want everybody to remember this was his resignation, and this was his decision, not council's decision. Council has accepted that resignation, so that's behind us. When that resignation happens, a vacancy is created under the Home Rule Charter, under Section 706. Council has a responsibility to appoint an acting manager or interim manager who shall exercise all the powers and perform all the duties of the manager's office. With regard to qualifications of the manager, there is a section in the Home Rule Charter, Section 701, that sets forth the qualifications for the manager. It says that the manager must have 3 years' experience in governmental administration. That's the only qualification in the charter. I understand that Ms. McKinney has had 25 years in governmental administration, and I think she's been through the tenure of 11 managers. She certainly satisfies that requirement that's set forth in the charter. The manager's position in the charter, and this is found under 702. The manager is the chief administrative officer under 702 of the Home Rule Charter. When a new administration takes office, they oftentimes surround themselves with people they have some confidence in. I've been doing this for some 39 years now, and I've seen this happen in virtually every community that I work in. I've also seen it in the private sector. I don't know whether anybody read the paper today, but the Allegheny County Airport Authority, demoted 2 of its major executives. This kind of activity does take place in our communities. Ms. McKinney has said that she did not have confidence in the former chief, and I think that's all she needs to say. The chief's position is not a civil service position, nor is it a position that permits an appeal by virtue of the Personnel Board. Those are two other boards that could hear an appeal. When you sit as the chief, you really sit as a at-will employee, a person at the pleasure of council. He certainly does have his contract, but as far as an appeal process, there is none. He or she can be replaced at the will of the manager under Section 702, and that's what our charter says. It's the manager's decision whether or not an employee is going to be terminated, demoted, suspended, or reduced in rank. Lynette's actions, or Ms. McKinney's actions concerning the chief are consistent with that Section 702. There's been talk that maybe the chief has been terminated. He has not been terminated. I want to make that clear. The chief, fact remains is, factually, that just hasn't happened. Rather, he, I believe, has taken a position of a reduced rank. He's still an active employee of this municipality. There's also been talk about detectives' positions by certain statements in newspapers. Just a little knowledge about the detective's position. We have an ordinance, a civil service ordinance, and a civil service board. The detective's position is a civil service position. That means that you must take an independent written exam and pass it. You must then submit to an oral exam and go through an independent board known as the Civil Service Board. Monroeville has been ordered by the Court of Common Pleas to establish this commission, and it was enacted in 2006. Prior to that, we had just the manager doing it, but now there's an independent board. The Civil Service Board abolishes the opportunity for politics, as it's supposed to be independent. Then only if a person passes both the written and the oral portion of the civil service exam and is placed on an eligibility list, can he or she be considered for a position that's higher than a patrolman, except for the chief. And again, as I said to you before, the chief is not subject to civil service nor to the personnel board. There has also been some comments about ethics and voting, and I want to address that in a very general sense. A councilman, so you're aware, is just not automatically ineligible to vote because he or she has a relative that's an employee. Any member of council can vote on a collective bargaining agreement or benefits which affect the entire class or group of individuals, even though their relative might be one of those members. This has been true for Monroeville's all their departments, the police department, the public works department, etc. However, a councilman cannot vote on a specific benefit for a specific relative only. Lastly, there's been some questions about whether or not the Section 703 has been breached in some fashion. Let me read to you what 703 talks about, and this talks about procedural limitations on council. Neither the mayor nor council nor any of its committees or of members shall direct or request the appointment to remove from office or employment by the manager or any subordinate, except for the purposes of inquiry. Council and its members and the mayor shall deal with the administrative services solely through the manager, and neither the mayor nor council nor any of its committees or members thereof shall give orders to subordinates except through the manager. This paragraph does not say and does not preclude council from inquiring or discussing with the manager the performance of an employee. Certainly, it's incumbent on council to let the manager know if they have lost some confidence in any employee. And then it's up to the manager within his or her responsibility to consider the comments made by council, and it's within her or his discretion to take any action. Thank you.
Right now, ladies and gentlemen, I will go to our list, and Mr. Jim Rosapel, if you'll please come on up. Please state your name for the record. Sign in with your address if you would, please.
Your pen works. My name is Jim Rosapel. I live at 2034 Marguerite Drive in Monroeville. Mr. Dice kind of took some of the stuff out of my little speech I was going to give. I'm going to ask the questions anyway. I know they're not going to be answered, but I'll still ask them because I know other people are going to ask them also. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I would like to give you a little bit of a background on who I am, as everybody else has done when they approach this microphone. I have been a resident of Monroeville for 68 years, more than a lot of you have been. I've served proudly for almost 30 years as a police officer here, as did my brother and my father. My father was one of the original Patton Township police officers. I know some of you don't know what Patton Township was. I was a member of the Gateway School Board for 4 years, 2 years of which I was president, which I'm proud of. I'm a board member now at the Gateway Foundation, and I'm proud to say I'm a Vietnam veteran. That's why I feel I can come up here and present my case. I have several questions I would like to ask the 4 members of council that participated in a non-transparent, behind closed doors push to remove Doug Cole from his position as chief. I will ask them, knowing that they won't be answered, and you're not required to answer them, but I must get the questions on the floor. Which of the 4 of you was the instigator of the removal of Chief Cole? If there are no charges against Doug for dereliction of duty, conduct unbecoming an officer, misappropriation of funds, or violation of a HIPAA law, why was he removed? What's the reason for it? I've questioned before and will ask again. I know this is Bruce just touched over this, but I have to ask it. I've questioned before and will ask again for a council member to sit on the police pension committee, then be involved in the removal of an existing chief of police. Wouldn't one or both of these positions be considered a conflict of interest? I was once told that the council member can make decisions for the entire department as a whole, but in my opinion, not to take actions as have recently been taking place, which would not only remove the chief of police, but possibly open the door for the advancement of a spouse in the department. Number 4, I would like to know publicly, right now, what the requirements are for the chief of police of Monroeville. And I'd like to know publicly as soon as possible, before there's any ordinances, resolutions, or anything else passed, limiting or changing the requirements to suit the situation.
Jim, let me interrupt you. I will have that information for you on Tuesday.
Thank you, Mayor. If this question I have to ask, if Chief Doug Cole is now reduced in rank to his last held position, would that not make him the supervisor of the detective branch? And if so, will he now have the input in the replacing of detectives to fill the positions of the soon-to-be vacated offices of the detective for vacation or people going on retirement? Or will council take away that privilege from him too? Quickly closing, I would like to say thank you for bringing more negative controversy to Monroeville. Thank you for making the police department become dysfunctional under council's micromanagement tactics. And thanks for removing our right as taxpayers and citizens of this community to have any input on this matter before you went behind closed doors. You 4 people have made a mockery out of your positions of power. You've shut the doors on transparency to your constituents and have made Monroeville not a better place to live, but a more bitter place to leave. By the way, elections coming up. I think certain individuals are going to find out how much this community respects its first responders. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Mrs. Sharon Rosapel, if you'll please come on up, and again, state your name for the record, sign in, if you would please.
My name is Sharon Rosapel. I live at 2034 Marguerite Drive, and I would just like to take an opportunity to address the interim manager, mayor, and members of council regarding recent actions taken by all of you, except for a few, and what you have done to our community. How dare certain individuals sitting here tonight absolutely insult the intelligence of the residents and the taxpayers of this fine community by your actions, saying that Mr. Cole had to be removed from his position without cause. I really feel that certain members of this council and administration need to be removed from their position because of the negativity that you have brought to our community, not only to the community, but I believe perhaps maybe some of the employees worried about their off-with-your-head attitude being presented in this community. I also feel that the taxpayers of Monroeville deserve an apology for the turmoil and embarrassment and the chaos that you have brought to this community. Mrs. Drumheller made a point today, or yesterday, to make the comment that she was hoping that tonight's meeting would not be taken up with a bunch of animosity and acrimony, that we need to concentrate on cutting costs. Well, guess what? We're facing a tax hike. And perhaps it could be because that certain members of this council have just squandered tens of thousands of my taxpayers' dollars on buyouts, unnecessary pay increases, and what on earth, I would like to know, are you doing to this community? In my personal opinion, in order to start the healing process, I recommend that Doug Cole be reinstated as chief of police of this fine community. He is a fine man, and as you can see, we all have vote of confidence for this individual. And the 4 council members that partook in his demotion owe the taxpayers of Monroeville an apology for what you have done with our money and to our community. And I know we can't touch upon it. Mr. Bruce brought up Section 703. But if you can investigate other people for supposedly misconduct, I think certain members of council need to be investigated for the same.
Mr. Lou Smith, if you would please, state your name for the record and your address, please sign in.
My name is Lou Smith. I reside at West Patty Lane, Turnpike Gardens, Monroeville. I'll start out by stating that I've lived in Monroeville since 1967. I've been a police officer in this community since 1967, starting out as a patrolman, going through the rank of detective, sergeant, lieutenant, and my last 12 to 15 years I was a detective lieutenant, of which this fine man sitting behind me, I still call him Chief Doug Cole, worked for me as a detective sergeant. The events of the last week sickens me and just about everybody I've talked to in Monroeville. And the four of you up here at this council, Mr. Erb, Mrs. Drumheller, Mrs. Allison, and you, Clarence,
Thank you. You forgot Mr., but that's okay.
you should be ashamed of yourself.
I am ashamed of a lot of things.
This certainly does not reflect on the other three councilmen or Mayor Arasenko. That's Councilman Johns, Councilman Steve, and Mr. Griesard. I watched what happened here in these meetings. I saw people complaining about not having money, and yet, I'll reiterate a little bit what Sharon Roosevelt said, but I know more as far as how much money was spent. We're talking close to $170,000 in buyouts that didn't need to be done because the two men that was made to leave here were both good men. The last man, I have more respect for, and you should have more respect for him, because he has more integrity and honesty in his little finger than the four of you having your entire bodies combined. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Doug Cole, because I've known him a heck of a long time. I saw him when he first came out here in 1985. Started out as a young patrolman, worked his way up to sergeant when he worked for me. He then became the assistant chief of police after I left. Had been through the FBI Academy. He matriculated at Penn State, obtained a degree from there, a bachelor's degree in the criminal justice. He then became the chief of police. He was groomed for the job. That's what it's all about. I watched him and knew that he was a fireman here for 37 years. 37 years. Volunteer fire department. He was a command paramedic for 35 years in this community. Doug Cole gave his life for this community. Ever since he's been a 16-year-old kid, he's been in service to this community. And I watched the four of you push him off to the side like garbage. And it appalls me. I'm so upset right now I can hardly speak, because what you did was despicable. Despicable. And you should be very, very ashamed of yourself. And I'm asking you to do the right thing and put this man back where he belongs and get on with what you're supposed to be doing, and that's representing people in your wards and for this community, and you're not doing it properly. That's all I have to say. Oh, excuse me, Mayor, I did forget one thing. I got to read a letter here because Chief David Sutmeyer, that was formerly on this police department, I need him one more minute if you'll indulge me.
You may.
He sent me a letter here and said, please read this at the council meeting. Stated February the 4th to the Monroeville Council and taxpayers. At one time in my life, I was proud to be a resident, a police officer, and a police chief in the municipality of Monroeville. I would always volunteer favorable comments and information about the formal association I've had with Monroeville. Recent actions of the majority of council pertaining to the firing of the manager and demotion of chief of police have caused me to reevaluate my thinking. After listening to total strangers on the street and others involved with politics and articles in the press, I am ashamed to let my history with the municipality be known. The 4 members of council who perpetuated this ridiculous act should be totally embarrassed and subject to public ridicule. Both Mr. Silka and Mr. Doug Cole are professionals. They're educated, trained, and have experience in their respective fields. We can't say that for the council members who are responsible for this foolish act. Just about every elected official becomes an expert in professions they know nothing about. They only have to obtain the right amount of votes. They believe this gives them the right to destroy the lives and professions of dedicated employees. Doug Cole has been a friend of mine and a colleague of mine for approximately 30 years. I know him well. He is the most dedicated, unselfish employee and resident of Monroeville. Everybody knows and should know of his involvement with fire departments, EMS, emergency management, and foremost his passionate approach to the police profession. I'm sure that Mr. Silka has the same qualities and should be given a chance to demonstrate them. Quit wasting the taxpayers' money on buyouts, severance pay, court costs, and fraudulent employee searches. You just got rid of the right people for the positions. Signed, S. David Sutmeyer, former Monroeville resident and chief of police.
Ms. Janice Olszewski, please. Please state your name for the record, sign in, and give your address if you would, please.
Janice Olszewski, Asbury Court, Monroeville, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Council, Mayor, Mr. Dice, managers. Mr. Dice, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your clarification on the numerous topics of discussion that have been, as we all have seen in the news media and in the, whether it be on television or in the newspapers and so on, about topics of discussion in this community that have been so widespread. It makes one feel bad to see that this type of animosity is so widespread and that we see people from our community, instead of trying to work together, go to the public on television, constantly belaboring issues that you've had the opportunity, given us the opportunity to understand this evening. These clarifications have been long needed to be addressed publicly to the residents of the community so that we can all understand the true facts. I'm pleased that you've also addressed the competency of our current interim manager, who's received many accolades on her performance from this mayor and council previously. And I don't understand why that was questioned either. So, Mr. Dice, I have a question for you that I understand, if I understand correctly, from what you've explained in the through the civil service process and through the that was ordered in 2006, that no chief of police, assistant chief of police, manager, councilperson, or mayor can select or assist any individual in the police department in achieving any promotion, and that employee must follow a specific civil service, the specific civil service process. And therefore, this is intended to eventually essentially eliminate political appointments. Is that correct?
That's
Basically.
correct. That would be a breach of the law if they attempted to do that.
Right.
That's correct.
So, from what I gather, then that decision is solely made by the manager. By the Civil Service Commission.
Right. They submit a list of eligibles, and then council gets an opportunity to pick from that list. But in order to get on the list, you have to go through that process.
That process, and
that's completely independent of council.
Okay, good. And also, when you were addressing these types of issues, so basically then all the rumors that I'm hearing in all this media that Mrs. Allison is trying to get her husband a promotion, this couldn't really happen. She has no say whatsoever in this process. It is the civil service process.
That's correct, and if he did appear on the list of eligibles, it would then fall to that rule that we talked about under the ethics, and that would be a specific, she wouldn't be voting on a class.
She would have to recuse
She'd have-
herself from that.
She'd have to abstain. is the
Yes,
word,
or
yeah.
abstain, yes. Okay, thank you. And as far as the loss of money that I keep hearing all these people say that we're going through, and money that's been lost, and they're blaming this particular council, well, if we look at this council sitting before us today, I can't see how we can finger point to just the people sitting here before us today. We didn't lose $10 million in the last year. I believe this is something that's been happening over a period of years, and there have been several councils that have been involved in the process. And to just blame, the people sitting here this evening, I think is rather unfair. And all I keep hearing is attacks on this council, on everyone for something. Instead, if these people were so concerned, why haven't we seen them here at the meetings before, at other Citizens Night meetings, so that they can share their thoughts with everybody? And maybe we wouldn't be sitting here today expressing our opinions and sharing these thoughts today. And from what I have read and seen, I do not believe, and I know I have not attacked Mr. Cole personally. I've not heard any personal attacks about him personally, or defaming his character or any of that nature. So I don't really think that that has been an issue. And I've lived in other communities where it's been quite common that when there's a change of administration or a change in their council, that the police chief is changed. And it's a matter of that particular governing body and under their regulations feeling comfortable with somebody that they feel is somebody that they would like to see who is qualified for that position. And when Mr. Bond, back prior to his leaving, retiring, appointed Mr. Cole, I didn't hear all the commotion and the problems and the questioning of, well, why were 3 lieutenants passed over for a sergeant to be made chief? People took it that this is what he felt was the best appointment at that time. So I think that we all have to show respect for the people on council and listen to what everybody says. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have to respond to a couple of things on what Ms. Olszewski said. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to do that. First off, in regards to what I did with the media, I'm going to be very honest with you. I felt that you all, as residents, in what I believe to be true, I would do it again today if I had to. That's number one. 2, I've given Mrs. McKinney accolades as a secretary. I have never, on record, given her accolades as the manager. Mr. Eric Poach, if you would, please.
Excuse me, one other question.
You're done. Next person.
Order here.
Let's have a little bit of order, folks.
Thank you.
Mr. Eric Poach, if you would please state your name for the record, state your and write your address and et cetera.
My name is Eric Poach. I live at 1325 Woodcliff Drive here in Monroeville, and been a pretty much lifelong resident of this community. Let me be very, very, very clear why I'm standing here. Okay. I've been a friend of Doug's for about 40 years now. We grew up together in this community for a long, long time. But I also want to take the opportunity, before I provide that support to him, which is the purpose of a Citizens Night, to express our opinions to you so that you're very clear and understanding. I also want to take the opportunity over the years, these have served as an opportunity for folks to provide information to you in council. Things that you may or may not know or understand. At the nexus of some of this problem has been discussions earlier on Health Information and Privacy Acts, things are in place. That's something that I do for a living. I have some of that information available to me. I can offer it to anyone available to that's interested in that information, so that it's clear in what's what has and has not been alleged to here. However, I'm still very, very confused. Very confused how we got to this point. It's a very difficult job each of you sit up there right now. 4 to 3, 3 to 4, difficult to try to count to that number, to try to get something done for the community. And sometimes it takes a little bit of courage. It takes a great deal of courage to sit here. I know I've talked to some people today, Mr. Ramsey perhaps also, where we talked about courage, some individuals in the past. I know, again, I've known Mr. Ramsey for about 30-some-odd years here, and had that opportunity to discuss, I know his love of political history as well, too, understanding. I mentioned to him a senator that stood up during the impeachment of Andrew Johnson at one time. Said, voted against his party for what he believed was right, the right idea. And I can appreciate anyone that sticks to their guns, sticks to what their beliefs are. But also, you have to be able to understand that sometimes people can make a mistake. And the last person I heard that didn't make a mistake, I can guarantee isn't in this room. There's no question about that. We also had a lot of discussions here this evening about funds that have and haven't been spent, overspent, underspent. I know recently this last council fought to prove a budget. Very difficult. Mr. Erb, I know you stood a little bit courageously for what you believed in at that time. However, in this particular case, you got it wrong. You absolutely got it wrong. And any of you who don't believe that you got it right or have it right with trying to support Doug or his position, you got the wrong cop. Absolutely, positively, emphatically the wrong individual. Said we've had the opportunity to work together for a number of years as friends, colleagues, and people that grew up here in Monroeville and people that care about Monroeville that's in place. So we will offer that opportunity to you as individuals to provide you information if you need it, so need it. And I can tell you 100%, sure as I'm standing here, okay, that if you sit here Sphinx-like and don't answer, don't speak to the folks here, you're doing the wrong thing. It's not an act of courage. We have a few people here that are acting courage, Mr. Duncan, Mr. Johns, Dr. Grayshock as well, and their support. And I hope you guys use that as an example of the courage, almost half of the courage, that man has demonstrated in all the years that I've known. Thank you.
Sam Garfolo, if you'll come on up, Sam, please sign in, state your name for the record as well as your address, if you would, please.
I brought my glasses tonight so I can see this.
I'd be lost without mine.
My name's Sam Garfolo, California Avenue, Monroeville. And just one thing I wanted to clarify from a previous speaker, Doug was the assistant chief when he was promoted to chief. He wasn't a sergeant. He didn't go from sergeant to chief. He went from assistant chief to chief. He was the assistant chief for 13 years. Anyway, here we are again. I was here about 10 days ago when these votes were taken for the manager and that. And Mr. Erb used a big word, capricious. Did you not use that night with Mr.
I did use that word.
And I wish that Rich was sitting next to me because, you know what, I didn't have a pocket dictionary with me. I have a dumb phone. I don't have a smartphone, so I couldn't text. I had no idea what capricious meant. So you got one up on me. I had to pull my dictionary out this week, and I looked at it. And I agree. I agree with him. He said it was capricious in their decision to fire the manager. And I agree with him. They were capricious. Capricious means without apparent reason and erratic. So I guess that was a capricious decision. At least that's what Webster's claims that capricious means. When I think of council, here are some words that should come to my mind. And as a 28-year police officer, I retired, they were ethics, integrity, moral values, and pride. Unfortunately, current council, when I think of you guys, I think of political favors, intimidation, and corruption. When you watch all the movies on TV, the mafia movies and all that, it's not personal. You guys are making this personal. It's business. It's not personal. I also wanted to set the record straight. When I was here last time, I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if we were going to be allowed to speak. And I was upset, and I said that I'd probably put the for sale sign in my yard, and I was moving. After thinking about it, I realized that I didn't move here to get employed. I've lived here my whole life. My family's been in Monroeville for over 80 years. It was called Patton Township back then. If you know where James Street is, it was a dirt road. My dad used to go out there. He used to ride their horses out there. My grandfather helped organize and set up Monroeville Volunteer Fire Company Fire Company 1. And my son, when he was home for Christmas, we were talking about issues out here and the problems. And he's in the U.S. Army currently. And he said no matter where he lives, this is always going to be his hometown, no matter where he's at in the world. So I said, well, you know what? I'm not letting anybody push me out of this town. I'm going to stand up for rights for me. I'm going to stand up for my parents who just can't make it out here to say what they want to say. Now, I know Mr. Erb was going to resign a few weeks ago, and for reasons he didn't, but you guys are really micromanaging the daily business of not only the police department, but the entire municipality. Leadership starts at the top. I was here in the 80s when we had Manager of the Month Club. In fact, there was one manager that I believe was on his way down here from New England or somewhere, and they fired him when he was on the plane. He never even made it to Monroeville, and he was gone. I have to tell you, that's unsettling as an employee. The other thing I could say is I've been here for every chief that was ever on this department. I worked for all of them. Doug was the assistant chief when I was here, but I've worked and I was here for every chief. And fortunately, during the time of having 12 or 14 municipal managers, we only had one chief. So when you start taking department heads down, where are you getting the stability to run this community? I've said it before, I truly wish we didn't have 7 election wards. I wish you guys were almost like the school board where it was at large. That way you don't have the political ties and the cronyism and that kind of stuff. The big problem I have is I was here last year when you fired Mr. Little, and I asked why was he fired, and I've still never gotten an answer. Can anybody tell me why did we fire the last manager? When you did a search, council sat down and interviewed them all. He was the best candidate. We hire him. When he doesn't want to do dirty work for council, he's fired. Same thing for this manager. I was up here 10 days ago and asked why. Nobody could answer. Is there a reason? Really? Was he so deficient? I know people that sat down on committees outside of Monroeville and worked with him, and they told me that he was the best manager we ever had. I never met him. They said he was the best. He was doing things that even Marshall Bond did not know how to do. He was bringing us into compliance. Well, I guess that's done. We're going to spend. When you search for managers, what's the cost associated to taxpayers? Is there any cost associated? I mean, you advertise in a newspaper, and so now we have time and effort wasted. I assume all 7 council people were involved in the interviews and everything? Yes. So you're wasting your time too. Why? I understand, like I said, that Mr. Silka was a pretty good manager. We talked about deficits. Council's been running a deficit. It's not just you as a council. These deficits have occurred since we had to put in a $20 or $26 million community park. The money that should have been used to pay down unfunded liabilities was put into baseball fields and soccer fields. Why? Because baseball and soccer had a big group. They filled council chambers like this when they were putting the park in, and they got things done their way. Now we're paying so much. It's just ridiculous. The problem I have is you raise our taxes, and I truly don't have an issue with that because the services we get are excellent. But then you turn around and basically, like Mr. LaPiccolo said last week, you paid this manager off for his silence. Why not just fire him? You'd have fired him, you could have saved $67,000 in severance. Why not just fire the man? I think Rich was right on that issue. Like I said, I've worked for all the chiefs, and if you don't have stability at the top, you're not going to have stability at the bottom. And the idea of, like I said, Doug came up through the ranks, and it's just ridiculous. Like I said, you need to sit and think of people. Like I said, you guys waste our money every day. We live in a representative republic, and you guys aren't representing us very well.
I just pray that the citizens of Monroeville stand up and fight for this community. We can't sit back and watch any longer. I'm glad to see all the people here tonight. I watch most of your budget meetings and stuff, and hopefully people get more involved. Thank you.
Sandy Gephardt, if you'll please come on up. State your name and address for the record, and please sign in.
My name is Sandy Gephardt. I live on Tower Lawn Drive in Monroeville. I'm here tonight because I'm disgusted and I'm outraged. I've lived in this community for 17 years. I have never heard a disparaging word against Chief Coles. In the few times in the 17 years that I have interfaced with him, both benign and otherwise, he has shown himself to be a man of honor, integrity, dedication, worthy, more than worthy, of the position of police chief, and I feel safe with him at the helm. In every instance, my impression has been of a man who is both approachable to the community and cares about it. He sees himself as a public servant. That has always been my impression. The majority for here, I might remind you that that is your position as well. You serve this community, or should be, and that you need to move Monroeville forward. Monroeville forward. Not just your personal agenda, your politics. Would you look at me, please? Ms. Allison.
Mayor, you're not supposed to be addressing us, you know that, right?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're supposed to address the mayor, so that's the way it's supposed to be set up.
Okay.
Continue, ma'am.
To demote Chief Coles is a travesty, and it by no means is serving Monroeville. And I guess my last question is actually rhetorical. With what's going on across the board in all communities these days in these economic times, why do we have a secretary for an interim manager?
Miss Georgiana Woodhall, please. Please state your name for the record, your address, and please sign in.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Okay.
Good morning. Good evening.
Thank you. Georgiana Woodhall. I've also been a resident of Monroeville, serve on several boards and commissions. I'd like to read for you Section 43.2. This is the Ethics Code. The Monroeville Council does hereby find that the public confidence and trust in the municipal government depends on the integrity, impartiality, commitment to the ethics of public officials and public employees. The reputation and efficiency and public confidence and faith in municipal government suffer whenever the public trust is violated by an official or employee who commits an act, misconduct, attempts to realize personal financial gain, or does not avoid conflicts of interest or the appearance of impropriety. I'm going to just read several sections out of this. Never use for personal benefit confidential information obtained in the course of one's duties. Never give special favor or special privilege to anyone in return for any personal benefit. Never accept favors, gifts, or benefits for oneself or one's family members, except in situations specified in this code. Attempt to remedy or eliminate public corruption, waste, and inefficiency when and whenever discovered. Demonstrate the highest standards of personal integrity, truthfulness, fortitude in all public activities. serve the public with respect, concern, courtesy, and responsiveness, and administer the public's business with professional competence, fairness, impartiality, efficiency, and effectiveness, recognizing that the service to the public is beyond service to oneself. In the duty of Monroeville Council to earn and maintain for the government of the municipality of Monroeville the reputation as a no-nonsense, honest municipality, and to end any section of the code in which the intent is in doubt should be construed in a manner that favors the public good over the convenience of a public official or employee. This applies to you, Mr. Mayor, every member of council, myself, anybody who serves on any board, commission, or authority. I don't know what happened. I just want to believe that 4 council members saw problems. I don't know what those problems are, and took action. And I want to say for the 3 individuals who chose just to not appear at a meeting and not represent their constituents, that concerns me more than you 4 that took action. Because that tells me that you were elected officials and you failed to represent your constituents. So I'd like to know from those 3 individuals, Mayor, why they did not attend a meeting and at least say, no, I don't approve of this.
I'd like to comment.
Mr. Duncan.
I was going to save this for my closing statements, but as you may know, approximately 10 months ago, the same scenario happened. 4 members of council went to the manager's office and gave the ultimatum to Mr. Little, resign or be fired. I attended that special meeting, and I fought to keep the manager with no success. Last week, the same, 3 council members and 1 by phone, went to the manager's office and gave him an ultimatum. Fire the chief of police or you'll be fired. The outcome was decided before the special meeting. Mr. Silka, resignation was signed and delivered prior to the special meeting that was called to order by Mr. Erb, Mrs. Allison, and Mrs. Drumheller. And I didn't want to be part of that outcome. That's the reason I did not show.
Georgianne, I'd like to respond to that too if I can. I'm aware that some of the residents are disappointed that I didn't participate in a special executive session to discuss the resignation of the manager. It was not my intention to not provide the residents of the 4th Ward without representation or a voice at this meeting. Rather, I felt that my presence there would have been fruitless, as the discussions regarding our manager were already made and finalized by the majority of council the day before the meeting was called. Quite frankly, I didn't want to be a party of dismissing the manager because I believe, and still do, he was and is a good fit to Monroeville. Let me assure you, my presence at that meeting would not have changed the outcome, nor would it have changed the fact that our appointed interim manager is once again our former secretary. You know, I know Lynette's a good lady. I don't have anything wrong with Lynette, but I do feel I do feel she's the right person, or is qualified. She is not the right person qualified to make the decisions to lead our borough. Again, something I do not want to be part of because my efforts would have been useless. I do support Monroeville, and I take the concerns of our citizens, especially those of the 4th Ward, to heart. And those of the 4th Ward have called me repeatedly. You know what I'm telling you.
I'd just like to make one other comment. When I watched the interview on Channel 4, Mayor, I would have thought that Mrs. Allison was the only member of council who had family member working for the municipality. How many members of council have family members working for the municipality of Monroeville? 1, 2?
I don't have a clue. I don't.
4.
Okay.
I believe
I
3.
think it was misleading. And Mayor, I really, I know you've been mayor for almost 5 years, and the comments were basically directed to Mrs. Allison as far as her husband being promoted. I think you probably should have had that information from Mr. Dice as far as civil service before you gave that interview, because it was misleading. And really, those comments had a tendency to divide members of the community, when really we should be combining. And I don't think these 4 individuals had an agenda. I really don't. I mean, you know, you can say what you want.
Please order, please, let's have some order.
And I can honestly say, and this will be my closing statement, I don't think, and I would not, I would agree with you, Mayor, that there's nobody in this room, including me, that would ever attack Doug Cole as far as his character, his job as a police officer, or as a fireman. I don't know what the problems were. I don't know what the issues were. I just like to think that you four had good reason.
Mrs. Woodhull, I'd like to comment as well.
Sure.
I mean, you mentioned that the four may have had issues or problems with, that they knew. But our community is set up with 7 different wards, with 7 different representatives. And those 4 did not share those findings with the entire council. So I was not given the opportunity, nor was Mr. Johns or Mr. Duncan, the opportunity to represent our wards. And the reason why I didn't show to the meeting was the same thing that what they said. It was a demonstration in the disgust that my residents feel because of all of this. The resignation letter was already signed. I had nothing to do with it. I learned about it 2 days prior to the meeting. I didn't agree with the severance package. I didn't agree with the potential interim manager. I wanted nothing to do with it. So you're right. I was not representing my community because I was not given the opportunity to represent my ward.
But I think that you should have showed up the meeting and just stayed and said,
I wasn't going to
don't agree.
masquerade like I was doing something for my ward.
Well, I don't think it's a masquerade. I just think it's very evasive and you have an obligation.
The obligation is to represent my ward, and I was not given that opportunity by 4 members of council.
As I said, I don't think there's anybody here that would attack Doug Cole's character. I would like to think that. Thank you.
I agree with that.
Okay, Mr. Don Sinar, I hope I'm saying your last name right. I apologize if I didn't do that correctly. Please state your name for the record. Please sign in and give your address if you would. Folks, please, we can have a little bit of quiet.
It's Don, my name's Don Swinner. That's close enough.
Well, I wasn't even close.
No, it's tough, it's a hard.
Sorry.
I met Chief Cole January 6, 2010, in a parent's worst nightmare. Chief Cole was among the first responders to a car crash that my daughter was killed in, not far from here on Thompson Run Road. Chief Cole was very compassionate towards my wife, my other daughter, and myself that night. He went from a police officer to a loving and caring dad, and his kind words were very comforting that night. I don't know if you'll get that quality or caliber of individual in someone else. I have the utmost respect for Chief Cole, and thank you for your time.
Hey, John Joseph Hughes, please, if you'll please come on up. Please sign in, state your name for the record and your address if you would, sir, please.
Okay, thank you.
You need another sheet, sir?
Oh, I got it. I should put my glasses on.
I understand that.
I'm John Joseph Hughes, and I reside at 211 Garden City Drive, and a taxpayer. I've known Doug Cole for quite a number of years, and I've found Doug Cole to be one of the best officers I have ever known. His dedication, his caring, his professionalism, he's one of the best. And I've been involved with American Police. I'm retired from American Police nationwide now, and I've had the opportunity to know a lot of police officers. And in my book, Doug Cole is one of the best, and I'm glad people are here supporting him. Thank you, group. In my book, what the four subjects have done is wrong, wrong, wrong. Well, I know from the good Bible, God teaches us to have forgiveness. So I forgive the four for what they have done. And I'm just hoping things can be corrected the way they should be. And I leave with that bird at the top, the peace bird. Peace I leave with you all. And let it begin with me. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor and board.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ralph Greco, if you'll please come on up, state your name and address for the record. Please sign in.
Thank you, Mayor. Recently,
Please state your name and address for the record.
Ralph Greco, 4804 Burke Drive, Monroeville. Recently, I spoke at a meeting and spoke about what a nice job Lynette had done while she was assistant manager.
You mean interim manager?
Interim manager, yeah. But I can't believe that she would turn around and fire Doug Cole, such a great officer. I've known Doug for 35 years, and I couldn't have a better neighbor. When I lived over off of Haymaker, and he was a good man, he's done an excellent job. I recently went and talked to him about a situation. He took his time, gave me some advice. You can't find a greater guy than him. And there's people, the four of you on this council, it's almost like you're the Gestapo and you just came in here and took everything over. And you're going to control it no matter what. I think you ought to rethink what you're doing here. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Len Young, if you'll please come on up. Please state your name and address for the record, and please sign in if you would, Len. You know the drill.
Good evening. My name's Len Young, Cooper Road here in Monroeville, and I'll be quite brief, but not to step on your toes, Mr. Mayor, but I'd like to entertain a motion from council to reinstate Doug Cole as police chief. With this whole debacle right now.
Glenn, just for the record, this is not a voting meeting, but you certainly can come back on Tuesday and say that same thing.
Okay.
That is a voting meeting.
Well, at least I tried. Okay. Well, like I said, I'll be brief, just see what you guys can do with that. As we know, elections are coming up, and certainly we all are responsible for our actions, and citizens may be a little upset with the decisions of certain council members. You can do something about that. And hopefully, next Tuesday, we'll have a motion to reinstate Doug. Thank you.
Hey, Miss Kathleen Hackworth, if you would please come on up, state your name for the record and your address. Please sign in.
Hello. If I seem nervous, I am.
Don't
I've
be.
spent
It's
my
okay.
entire
This
life
is your
avoiding
time.
politicians. I live on Saunders Station Road in Monroeville. I'm going to read this because I'm nervous. I'm feeling daggers coming from in front of me. As I'm a friend of the Cole family and Doug Cole has my full support and my respect, I am certain that all the praise and compliments I can offer will fall on deaf ears of at least 4 of you. I do want to say that I'm so very sorry this is happening to a wonderful family. Nobody deserves it less. So instead of that, I will speak to my perception of you, as well as my perception of the events orchestrated by the majority of council. Since the Cole family does not go around bemoaning their circumstances, and I will not ask for details about this particular personal situation, I can only go by the information some of your members have given to the news media. And since you have been less than forthcoming with any information, or more noticeably, any tangible reasons for the actions you have taken, when you say you have demoted Doug Cole without cause, my perception from you is that there is no cause, however hard you may have tried to find or manufacture one. This creates another perception that this action then is personal. Either you don't like the man holding the job, or you have a friend in the wings who you like better. No accusations, just my perception from what you have told the media. Apparently, there was a non-public meeting in which former Monroeville manager Mr. Silka was pressured to fire Doug Cole because the majority of council had no confidence, whatever that means. Some of you have backpedaled on that. I believe Mr. Silka, however. To his credit, he resigned rather than do something he thought was not his to do, and I've yet to hear a reason for the no confidence. So whatever your reasons are for now, for the second year in a row, we're looking for a new manager, ours having left under what reads like a hush-hush, sweep-it-under-the-rug agreement. And for the second time in a year, we have, according to the media, a woefully underqualified interim manager. I was a secretary. When I left Westinghouse, I would not presume to run the company after I'd been there a number of years. An interim manager who is going to look into things, hire new police officers, and be quoted saying things that sound directed and rehearsed. Again, this is just my perception. Because of my perceptions of these recent events and my opinion of council, and I'm certain I'm not alone in this, after all this, has dropped lower than I thought possible. I am embarrassed for Monroeville that this is our elected council, and I include all of you in this. Those of you who did not attend the non-public meeting because you did not want to be a party to what was going on, shame on you. Do your job. When you do not attend, when you do not speak up, then you stand for nothing. I'm in your ward, and I think you should have been there. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just as a point of record, there was no non-public meeting. There was a special session of council which was open to the public, and people did come, people did speak.
Mr. Paul Calahari, I hope I'm saying that right. Please state your name for the record, your address, and please sign in if you would, sir, please.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Paul Calari. I live at 2511 and a half Haymaker Road. I'd just like to start out, Mr. Mayor, I agree with you when you said you were embarrassed. I'm in Ward 5. How do you think I feel? Unlike a lot of people here, I haven't lived in Monroeville for 15 years. I haven't lived in Monroeville for 20 years. But what's different is I moved here by choice. I have a wife, I have 2 young daughters. We just moved into the state. My wife got to pick the house. My job was to pick a location. So I did a lot of research. I researched the schools. I researched the police department. I found the low crime rate here to be phenomenal. I think the passion and emotion that I see here from all the citizens is the reason I moved here. I don't know Chief Cole personally. I didn't know Mr. Silka personally. But I know a man who can run a police department like that and then be removed for no cause. I don't know what that means, by the way. And I understand that's not going to be explained to us, and I think that's not a good thing for a community I moved my family into, and I plan to raise my family here. And now that's in question. We have a council here, it's broken. You can't run a community, you can't run a business, you can't run anything when your 7 leaders, your 7 representatives, they don't work together. The only people I've heard speak so far, and I'm not going to pretend to know everybody, and I don't have all this impassioned speech. I've heard a few people talk, but I keep hearing the same questions of why was Mr. Silka let go? Why was Chief Cole demoted? Nobody has an answer for that yet. So I started to do a little research before I came here, and I found out the same thing happened to a Mr. Little. Wow. If that's history not repeating itself, what is? And another point that I wanted to make was, Lynette, I don't know you, no offense, but you're a secretary doing a boss's job. Mr. Erb, when they were looking, I found an article, they were looking for academic and professional distinctions favored by the committee included a Master's of Business, Administration or Public Administration, and being an International City Council Management Association, a credentialed manager. That's what you were looking for before. And that's okay now. We took a secretary, and the second day on the job, she fires the solicitor, fires the city manager, and then we demote the chief of police. That's a lot to bear for one person. I mean, you want to talk about poor decision-making? That's poor decision-making. I understand why you three didn't go to this closed-door meeting. I mean, it happened to you. I read another article. Again, history repeating itself. It happened to you when you first, and I'm sorry if my times are a little off, but it sounds like as soon as the first 3 minority members got onto council, the exact same thing happened. We had a hurry-up, hush-hush, shut door. Oh, city manager's gone. And I'm sorry, I think it was Miss Drumheller made the comment, and it was said before, you hope this wasn't filled with acrimony and animosity, that we needed to save money. I'm not an accountant major, but I could have saved you over $67,000 if you would have thought about a decision you made. Would have been good. You know, I manage a business. It's about $9 million business, not the 20-some million that we're dealing with here. But I can tell you, if I had members on my management team make closed-door, backroom decisions, that I'm not going to pretend I know why, that if you can't even answer to the decisions you're making, they wouldn't last. I mean, they wouldn't last in my company. They wouldn't last in anybody else's company that I know, and let you guys are going to sit here and have the, I'm sorry, and pretend like we're not going to react. You can't explain your decisions, but you want my tax money to pay for your decisions. And that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. So when you can start answering those, you know, maybe I'll start being a little more comfortable with my community, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think what we need to do here, Mr. Mayor, is we need to fix this council. Nothing's ever going to get done. I guess I'll close on that. Thank you for your time. Thank you,
Thank you,
members of
Paul.
council.
How many more do you have?
3 sign-ins.
Okay, I thought we would just go through that list and then take a small break.
Okay.
Okay.
A Tom Kane, please. Tom Kane, if you'll please come on. Maybe outside. Tom Kane. There you go. Sir, if you'll please state your name and address for the record and please sign in. Ladies and gentlemen, before Tom starts, after we get all the folks that have signed in to address council, for Sharon's sake, we're going to give her fingers a couple of minute break, and then I'll open it up to anybody that did not sign in, and you certainly, again, have a right to come up and talk with council. Sir, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Tom Kane. I live at 353 Willowheads Drive here in Monroeville. I've been a resident of Monroeville for about 28 years this fall. Just for some background, some foundation, I've never spoken at a council meeting in my life. I've never complained about one thing regarding our municipality, ever. I think we've got some of the best services in the city surrounding of Western Pennsylvania. Also, for the record, everyone on council would know that I'm not friends with anybody here. I don't know you folks, and you don't know me. Similar with Doug Cole. I'm not friends with the Cole family. I'm not friends with Doug Cole. My only dealings with Chief Cole have been on a professional level, and that's been very minor at best. I share all this with you because I don't have a horse in this race. I gain nothing from standing here in front of you right now. But as a resident of Monroeville, I am embarrassed by every one of you. The 4 who made his decision to out Doug Cole, and the other 3 who didn't show up and have the courage to stand up here and raise a little hell when they didn't feel their voices being heard and get it on record. They should have been standing here doing it. Now, I also need to mention that when news about Chief Cole broke on Saturday morning, I began to make a few phone calls, just nothing more than inquiring what's going on. I called a few people who had connections in Monroeville, and they still have connections in Monroeville. I spoke to a young lady, I'm not going to mention her name, who has connections in Monroeville, here at the municipality. No sooner than my second phone call to this young lady, I was told that I need to be careful. Careful was the word. I need to be very careful when I'm speaking to the council. I kind of dismissed her comment. I didn't think too much of it. I said, what do you mean about being careful? And this person said that I may have a target on my back for being a little outspoken. Actually, again, dismissed her comment and went on with the conversation. 4 hours later, I made about 5 or 6 phone calls that morning, and Representative Ramsey, or Councilman Ramsey, I spoke to him for about 15 or 20 minutes. He was kind enough to take a phone call. I didn't agree with one thing the man said, but he was at least a stand-up gentleman, and we had a nice conversation. 4 hours later in the afternoon, I received a phone call back from a person that I inquired about, another person who I would consider very connected to the Monroeville municipality. When he called me back, and I will quote you, he said, Tom, you need to be very guarded with your comments at council. Very guarded. And I said, what do you mean, very guarded? You're the second person that said this to me. I don't even know if these 2 people know each other. I have no clue. I said, what do you need to be guarded with my comments? He said, well, you may start getting some tickets. You may start getting pulled over. You may start having public works. Maybe your mailbox is going to get knocked over by a snowplow. Maybe you're going to have problems in your house. Have we really become a town where intimidation is now playing a role? Have the politics gotten so ugly on our council, so ugly, that people may be afraid to come up here and speak? That's mind-boggling to me. 28 years of living here, and I've never said boo to anybody on this board. No one. Previous councils and current council. When you live in a town in Monroeville, as small as Monroeville, for 28 years, you hear a lot of stories. And typically I dismiss most of them. You know, half of them are made up, half of them maybe want to be, or a third of them. Some of them are true, some of them are not true. I've heard stories about employees in the water department, the public works department, the parks department, and the police department. I used to live on Shoemaker Drive. I was right near 2 doors away from the municipality, the works building on Shoemaker on Thelray Drive. I lived there for 12 years. You hear a lot of stories. You hear a ton of stories, and you kind of dismiss them. But I've heard stories from how people can milk the system in Monroeville for the incredible overtime pay that they receive. I've heard stories from folks having affairs, or people who want to get promoted. It's embarrassing, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop right now. This council has done nothing but brought embarrassment to our city. You folks have to understand that the stories aren't coming from residents sitting on the street saying, hey, did you hear what happened? Let me give you a classic example, a true story that happened. I was at the Gateway Grill last summer, enjoying a dinner, and there was 5 or 6 guys at the bar eating dinner, having a few beers, having a good time. Now, they're yucking it up at the bar. That's great. They're having a great time. I don't know why my chief of police is brought up in that conversation. I don't know why Miss Allison is brought up in that conversation, but it surely was. I don't know Miss Allison from the hole in the wall. I have no clue who this gal is. I don't know about your political affiliations. I know nothing about you guys. But I find it real interesting that the same topic that I heard very directly, the guys were standing less than 3 feet away from me. And I don't know if they were policemen, public works officials, parks officials. I don't know who these guys were. I have no clue. But what I find very interesting is that the same conversation that was happening last May or June came to fruition this past weekend. I find that amazing. And what's even more amazing is you guys went and hired a qualified individual. You vetted this person, you hired this person,
And the same conversation that I heard this past May or June is now coming to fruition, and this guy's not only canned or gone, whatever you want to call it, but then we pay him $67,000 of tax money that we don't have. I want a refund. So let me tell you about Chief Cole. There's probably not a lot of you here right now that know some things about Chief Cole. And again, my involvement with Doug Cole is on a very minimal basis. But I will tell you something that Chief Cole did that probably most of you haven't a clue about. This past 2 years ago, a neighbor of mine passed away. This neighbor had over 1,000 firearms, in his home. He had tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition. That's right, maybe pushing 200,000 rounds, tens of thousands of rounds. The ammunition was so steep that when I put it on there, it bent. Angle iron, shelves. There was also other things in the house that I don't care to talk about right now and I shouldn't be talking about. I was dealing with the ATF for almost 8 months when this went on, me personally. It's not illegal to own over 1,000 guns. You can have 10,000 guns in your house. But it did cause and it did present a safety issue, not only to Monroeville, but to Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and really the surrounding states. It presented a major problem in this area. The ATF supervisors, and I have every one of their names that I dealt with, were not just concerned, terrified may be a little strong of a word, but they were deeply concerned that the situation was handled properly. If word got out that this house was empty, and there was 1,000 guns in this house, if word got out that this was going on, if it wasn't handled properly, it would have been a disaster, not only for Monroeville, but for the entire region, for the entire country. Chief Cole handled that perfectly. And I don't know any other person in this police department that would have handled it like Doug Cole handled it. Now, if Doug Cole did something wrong, if Doug Cole did something illegal, fire him. Fire him. But for this council to hire other people or to investigate or vet new police officers coming into this area or a possible new chief, you're wasting, again, more of my tax dollars. And I resent it. I think what happened to Chief Cole is nothing but bad politics. It reeks of bad politics. But politics aside, what you folks on council have done is caused the taxpayers of Monroeville a small fortune. Now, I don't know if $68,000, what you paid this last guy, or the other 50 or 60 or 100 you gave the guy before him means anything to you folks. But $100,000+ means a lot to me. And again, I think I deserve a refund, and I think every person in this room and in this town deserves a refund. Shame on all you guys. You don't hire Monroeville, you don't hire managers to run our town and then fire them or ask them to leave because they won't do your dirty work. From a town who is increasing its residents on taxes, it speaks to your inability, who are unqualified to do the job, to hire the right people, that they're not going to be your puppets or do the things you guys want them to do. 2 people come in and the same thing happens twice. Chief Cole should immediately be reinstated as chief. Period. I think every one of you guys, whether you voted for Chief Cole to be out or whether you voted for Chief Cole to be here, I think every one of you should have the courage to step down. Because the 3 who didn't show up, it bothers me. It bothers me as a resident that you guys aren't up here fighting. It bothers me that something to a good man and his family, that you guys seem to bulldoze your way through this stuff and don't think about what you're doing. I find it cowardly convenient that the solicitor, or that's the Monroeville Chamber or council rules or whatever it is, doesn't share with us why Chief Cole was demoted. It's cowardly convenient. You know, we may not agree with what you did, but have the courage to tell us what happened. It doesn't mean it's going to change. It doesn't mean you're going to hire him back. But I think when you guys make a decision like that, it's not you 4, it's not you 3. It's all of us as a community. It's every one of us. I want my town back. I want the embarrassment to stop. I want my town back. What you folks have done, you folks have single-handedly embarrassed our community. Single-handedly. Not me, not these good people behind you, not Chief Cole, who has served this town with honor. For his whole life has been dedicated to Monroeville. His entire life. And you guys have single-handedly embarrassed our community. Did you really plan on all the TV networks to be here, filming this, recording this? It's unbelievable. I want my town back. And I think all you guys have the courage to own up to what you did, put Chief Cole back where he belongs, because find me, show me another better officer that could do what Chief Cole does in this town.
We still have two more.
Okay.
You okay? Okay. Gary DiLorenzo. Maybe he's outside. Gary DiLorenzo. Hi, Gary. If you'll please sign in, state your name for the record, if you would, please. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, while Gary is signing in, we are going to take, after one more resident, we will take about a 5-minute break for Sharon.
Good evening. My name is Gary DiLorenzo.
That'll pick you up here.
Okay, I'm at 451 Colonial Drive. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for letting me have a few minutes here for some words tonight. I have two thoughts I wanted to share with you. Who am I, and why am I here? Some of you might not know me, but I'm a little bit different from most of the people that are here tonight. I'm not a native to Monroeville. I've been a resident for about 26 years now, that I moved to Monroeville with my wife, where she and I only knew two people in Monroeville, my cousin and his wife down the street. And over the years, we have come to love Monroeville. We raised our children here, and it turned out to be a community that we're proud to be a part of. As we get older, we look back on how do we provide services to the community. And I respect the position that each of you are in community service, in public service in particular. I myself am an example where I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Monroeville Municipal Authority. So I can appreciate your role that you're providing in the area of customer service, and especially political service back to the community. Why am I here tonight? I'm a little bit different from the rest of the audience that's been speaking tonight because I just wanted to share a little different perspective. I don't really know Mr. Cole and his background as police chief. I don't understand or know the details of the manager positions over the last few years. I'm not here to get into any discussion or ask any questions on those specifics. I only have one thought that I want you to think about. It's called organizational structure. An organizational structure has a relationship where when you look at an organization, there's a strategic organization that identifies the vision and the direction of your organization. And then you have people under you to help you execute that. And I was thinking outside, what's the analogy that I can share with you? And I thought of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you look at the Rooney family, how many head coaches have they had since 1969? 3 head coaches. What does that imply? That the Rooney family, at a strategic level, they have leadership, they're innovative, they have a visionary direction for the organization. I wanted to ask council, and I'll make this quick because I believe we're up for a break. So I asked council to think about this idea. We have an opportunity here tonight, based on feedback from a variety of individuals, that if you treat yourself as the strategic organization of Monroeville, you have the position to make decisions at a tactical level related to individuals at the managerial level and the police chief level. It appears, perception might be reality to different people, but it appears that there's some fragmentation on how Monroeville is being governed. Okay? From that perception, I asked this council, the 7 of you, to regroup from tonight, Thursday night, prior to the formal meeting on Tuesday night, to collectively show some unicism, some unity as a collective group to come up with a solution that has value for the citizens of Monroeville. And that's my only comment. Thank you.
Robert Serafini, if you'll please come on up. Please state your name and address for the record. And
My name is Robert Serafini. I live at 4929 Point Circle Drive in Monroeville. I'm going to make this as short as possible. I've listened to all of the accolades for the chief. I think he's well-deserved of that. I'm going to ask the 4 people who actually were against him, if one of them, after listening to all of this that has been said tonight, would like to change their vote. I'd like to hear any one of the 4 have the courage to say, I was wrong in what I did, and I'd like to change my vote. Does any one of you have the courage to do that? None of you? Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about a 5-minute recess to give Sharon's fingers a break. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes.